Hello everyone, I am Mano Scaling, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also tell me where you are from and what time you are watching. Now get comfortable and relax. Story 1. My name is Justin. I'm 34. The dirt road to Kisatchie National Forest ended at my own car. I know how that sounds. I know it doesn't make sense. But I'm telling you exactly what happened during those 5 days in October, and if you don't believe me, that's fine. I stopped caring about being believed the moment I saw my silver Honda Accord sitting at the end of a road I'd been driving down for 3 hours. Let me start from the beginning. I'd planned this trip for months. A solo RV adventure through Louisiana's backwoods. After the divorce, after losing the house, after watching my life collapse into a series of forwarding addresses and storage units, I needed to disappear for a while. The Kisatchie seemed perfect. 604,000 acres of longleaf pine forest, remote enough that I could go days without seeing another soul. I'd rented a modest Class C RV from a guy in Shreveport, loaded it with supplies, and headed south on Highway 165. The ranger station near Calcasieu gave me a map and a warning. The woman behind the desk, her name tag said Deirdre, had deep lines around her mouth and eyes that suggested she'd spent more time frowning than smiling. "You going in alone?" she asked. "That's the plan. Phone service is spotty, real spotty, and we've had some strange reports lately." "Strange how?" She hesitated, her finger tracing a circle on my map around an area called Wild Azalea Trail. People getting turned around, coming out different places than they expected. One couple swore they drove the same stretch of road for 6 hours. Keep your wits about you. I should have paid more attention to that warning. The first day went smoothly. I found a dispersed camping spot off Forest Road 366, backed the RV into a clearing surrounded by pine trees that stretched up like cathedral pillars. The October air carried that particular smell of the deep south, pine resin, red clay, and something organic and old underneath. I set up camp, built a small fire, and watched the sun sink through the canopy until the forest filled with violet shadows. That night I heard something circling the RV. Footsteps, definitely footsteps, but with an odd rhythm. 3 quick steps, pause, 2 slow steps, pause. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, sweeping the beam across the clearing. Nothing. The footsteps had stopped the moment I opened the door. "Probably just a deer," I said aloud, my voice sounding thin in all that darkness. But I didn't believe it. Deer don't walk like that. The second day, I decided to drive deeper into the forest. The map showed an old logging road that supposedly led to a scenic overlook. I packed the RV up early and headed out, following Forest Road 366 until it intersected with an unmarked dirt road that matched the description. The road was rough, all ruts and exposed roots, and the canopy grew so thick overhead that I had to turn on my headlights even though it was 11 in the morning. I drove for what felt like 20 minutes. The trees pressed in on both sides, scraping against the RV's flanks with sounds like fingernails on metal. Then the road opened up, and I saw it. My car. My silver 2019 Honda Accord with the dent in the rear bumper from when I'd backed into a parking meter. The one I'd left at the rental place in Shreveport. The one that was supposed to be 127 miles north of here. I stopped the RV and sat there, engine idling, staring at the impossible thing in front of me. The car sat perfectly centered in the road, facing me, as if someone had carefully placed it there. I could see my parking permit dangling from the rearview mirror. My hands were shaking as I turned off the RV and climbed out. The forest had gone completely silent. No birds, no insects, nothing. Just that crushing quiet that makes your ears ring. I walked toward the Accord. The dirt beneath my boots felt wrong. Too soft, like walking on foam. Each step made a sound like a wet sigh. When I reached the car, I cupped my hands against the driver's side window and looked inside. Empty. Everything exactly as I'd left it 2 days ago. My sunglasses on the dashboard, the coffee stain on the passenger seat that had never quite come out. I tried the door. Locked. That's when I noticed the keys sitting on the hood. My keys. the ones that should have been in the lockbox at the rental place. I picked them up. They were warm, like someone had just been holding them. "Hello?" My voice came out as a croak. "Is someone fucking with me?" The forest swallowed my words without even an echo. I unlocked the Accord and sat in the driver's seat trying to make sense of this. My phone showed no service. It hadn't since yesterday. The car started immediately when I turned the key, radio blaring to life mid-song. The classic rock station from Shreveport. Linward Skynerd. That smell. I turned it off and just sat there, breathing, thinking. Maybe I'd gotten confused about where I'd left the car. Maybe there was some logical explanation. Maybe. The RV's horn blared behind me. I jumped, slamming my head against the car's roof. The horn blared again. 3 long blasts. But I could see through my rear window that no one was in the RV. The driver's seat was empty. I got out of the Accord and walked back to the RV, my heart hammering. The door was closed. I'd left it open. I was certain I'd left it open. I reached for the handle and it swung outward before I could touch it, as if tugged by an invisible hand. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it, except for one thing. My map lay spread across the small dinette table. I hadn't left it there. I'd folded it and put it in the glove compartment. But there it was, spread flat, with a red marker line drawn across it. The line started at my current location and traced a winding path through the forest, ending at a spot marked with a crude X. Beneath the X, someone had written in blocky letters, "Come home." My handwriting. That was my handwriting. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. This wasn't possible. This wasn't. The RV lurched forward. I hadn't started the engine. The keys were in my pocket. But the RV was moving, rolling forward slowly along the dirt road, past the Accord, deeper into the trees. I lunged for the driver's seat, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. They felt heavy, like they were filling with concrete. "Stop," I tried to say, but my mouth wouldn't form the word. The RV picked up speed. Through the windshield, I watched the road unspool ahead, curving and twisting through the pines. The trees seemed to lean in as we passed, their branches scraping the windows with sounds like fingernails, like they were trying to get in. I don't know how long we drove like that. Time felt slippery. The shadows outside shifted wrong, sometimes flowing backward, sometimes freezing in place. At one point, I looked down at my watch and saw the second hand spinning counterclockwise. Finally, the RV stopped. I was in another clearing, this one smaller than the first, hemmed in by pines so thick I couldn't see more than 20 feet in any direction. The late afternoon light barely penetrated the canopy. Everything had that greenish, underwater quality you get in old forests. My legs worked again. I stumbled to the door and practically fell out of the RV, gasping for air. The moment my boots hit the ground, I heard it. Footsteps. The same pattern from the first night. 3 quick steps, pause, 2 slow steps, pause. Circling the clearing, staying just beyond the tree line. "Who's there?" I shouted. "What do you want?" The footsteps stopped. Then something spoke. "Justin." Oh, my name and my voice coming from the darkness between the trees. "Justin, come here." I backed against the RV. My hand found the door handle. "Justin, I've been waiting." The voice was mine, but wrong. The words were shaped correctly, but the tone underneath was alien, like someone doing an impression without understanding what they were copying. A figure stepped out from between 2 pines. It looked like me. Same height, same build, same thinning hair and 2-day stubble. It wore the clothes I'd worn yesterday, my red flannel shirt and jeans. But it moved wrong. Its joints bent at angles that were almost right but not quite, like a puppet controlled by someone who'd only seen humans in photographs. "What are you?" I whispered. "I'm you." It smiled, and I saw that its teeth were too uniform, too white, like rows of bathroom tiles. "I've been you for 3 days now." "That's not possible. You drove here 3 days ago. You set up camp. That night I found you." It took a step closer, and I noticed it didn't leave footprints in the dirt. "I needed a shape." "Yours fit. Stay back. But you need to understand." Another step. Its eyes didn't blink. I don't think it had eyelids. This isn't your first time here. You've been coming back to this place for days now, driving in circles, trying to leave, but the roads always lead back. I looked past it at the tree line. In the growing darkness, I could see other figures standing between the pines, dozens of them, all watching. The forest keeps what enters it, the thing that looked like me said. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. People come in, and the forest redistributes them, takes them apart and puts them back together in different places, different times, different configurations. You're lying. But even as I said it, I felt the truth of it settling into my bones like ice water. Your car keeps showing up because you keep arriving. Your map changes because you keep drawing different routes, trying to find a way out. But there isn't one, Justin. There's only the loop. Drive forward, end up where you started. Drive backward, end up where you started. The directions don't matter here. Geography doesn't matter. I thought about the ranger's warning. People getting turned around, coming out different places than they expected. What happened to them? I asked. The ones who did get out? Its smile widened. They didn't. They just stopped remembering that they were trying to leave. Eventually, they settled into the loop, accepted it, became part of the forest's circulation. They're still here. It gestured to the figures in the trees. All of them. Some have been here for years, decades maybe. Time doesn't flow right in the loop. One of the figures moved closer, stepping into the dim light. It was an old woman in a dress from the 1960s, her face slack and empty. Behind her, I could see others. A man in a suit. 2 teenage girls holding hands. A child in pajamas. We're all waiting, the thing wearing my face said. Waiting for new shapes, new configurations. The forest needs variety. It gets bored with the same patterns repeated endlessly. I'm leaving. I turned to climb back into the RV. You can try. I got inside, locked the door, as if that would help, and grabbed the keys from my pocket. My hands shook so badly it took 3 tries to get the key in the ignition. The engine turned over. Thank God. I threw the RV into gear and stomped on the gas, tearing out of the clearing. Branches whipped the windshield. Something thumped against the side. Through the mirror, I could see the figures standing in the clearing, watching me go. The thing that looked like me waved. I drove for hours. The road twisted and curved, splitting into branches that I chose at random. Left, right, straight ahead, it didn't matter. The forest all looked the same. Pine trees and red dirt and that sickly green light filtering down through the canopy. My phone was useless. The GPS showed my location as a blue dot in a white void. No roads, no landmarks. When I tried to zoom out, the screen just kept showing more white space, infinite and empty. The gas gauge sat stubbornly at 3/4 full despite all the driving. Around midnight, I came to another clearing. I stopped the RV and slumped over the steering wheel, too tired to process what I was seeing. My silver Honda Accord. Same dent, same parking permit. I'd driven in a circle, or the road had curved back on itself, or space had folded. I didn't know anymore and was starting not to care. I climbed into the back of the RV and collapsed on the small bed, still wearing my boots. Sleep came fast and heavy, dragging me down into darkness. I dreamed I was driving. The road ahead split into 2 paths, then 4, then 8, branching like blood vessels, each one leading to a different version of the same forest. In one, it was day. In another, night. In a third, the trees were on fire but not burning. I could see myself driving down each path simultaneously, infinite Justins and infinite RVs, all trying to find a way out, all failing. When I woke up, it was dark outside. Not night dark, the absence of light dark you get in caves. I turned on the RV's interior lights and they pushed back the blackness maybe 3 feet before it swallowed the illumination completely. I sat up and looked out the window. Faces pressed against the glass. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All crowded around the RV, staring in with empty eyes. I recognized some from the clearing. The old woman, the man in the suit, the child in pajamas. But there were others. So many others. A teenager with a Walkman clipped to his belt, a woman in a wedding dress, a park ranger with a name tag I couldn't read. They didn't move, just stared. Then, in perfect unison, they all smiled. Not happy smiles, not cruel smiles, just the mechanical lifting of lips that something might do if it had been told, "This is what humans do to show friendliness," but had never understood why. I scrambled away from the window, pressing myself against the far wall. The faces tracked my movement, all those heads turning in sync. Someone knocked on the door. "Justin?" My voice again. "Justin, I brought you something." I didn't answer. The knock came again, harder. "Justin, don't be rude. I've been working on this all day." Against every instinct screaming at me not to, I moved to the door and looked through the small window. The thing that looked like me stood there, holding something. In the darkness, I couldn't tell what it was at first. Then it shifted the object and I saw. A map, made of skin. "I made this for you," it said, its voice muffled through the door. "It shows all the roads, all the possible routes, every direction you could drive. Want to see?" It held the map up to the window. I could see roads etched into the flesh in what looked like dried blood. The network was impossibly complex, roads layering over roads, intersections occurring in impossible dimensions. Looking at it made my head hurt, like trying to see in 4 directions at once. "The roads are alive," it said. "They grow and change and loop back on themselves. That's why you can't leave. You're not driving on roads. You're inside something's veins, the forest's circulatory system, and you're just blood now, being pumped through over and over forever." "Stop it," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Why? Don't you want to understand? Don't you want to know what you've become?" "I haven't become anything. I'm still me." It cocked its head at an angle that was just slightly too far to be natural. "Are you? How do you know? Maybe you're already part of the loop. Maybe you've been here for years and you've just forgotten. Maybe I'm the real Justin and you're the copy." That possibility struck me like a physical blow, because I couldn't prove it wrong. I had memories of my life before, the divorce, the house, the drive to Louisiana, but how did I know those were real? What if they were just installed? Backstory given to a thing to make it think it was human. "Look at me, Justin." The thing pressed its face against the window. Up close, I could see the imperfections. Its skin was too smooth, without pores. Its eyes didn't have the tiny red veins you see in everyone's eyes. You and I, we're the same. We're both just patterns the forest is playing with, shapes it's trying on. It doesn't matter which one of us was first. I backed away from the door, my hands shaking. "I'm going to break the loop," I said, more to myself than to it. "I'm going to find a way out." It laughed, and the sound was like wind through dead branches. "Oh, Justin, haven't you been paying attention? That's what you always say, every time, right before you start driving again." The faces in the windows pressed closer, their breath fogging the glass. I spent the rest of that night huddled in the back of the RV, watching the door, waiting for something to try to get in. Nothing did. As the hours crawled by, the faces gradually faded back into the darkness until I was alone with the sound of my own breathing and the creaking of the RV's frame. When gray light finally seeped through the windows, I made a decision. I couldn't keep driving. The roads didn't work. They just led in circles or loops or whatever topology this place operated under. So I would go on foot. Cut straight through the forest, ignore the roads entirely. There had to be an edge somewhere. The forest couldn't be infinite. Could it? I packed a backpack with water bottles, energy bars, my phone, useless but I couldn't leave it, and a hunting knife I'd brought for gutting fish. Then I stepped out of the RV into the pearl gray morning. The Accord was gone. In its place was a different car, an old Buick LeSabre with wood paneling. I walked past it without looking too closely. The forest felt different in daylight. Less overtly threatening but somehow worse, like a predator pretending to sleep. The pines stood in perfect rows, too perfect, like someone had planted them with a ruler and protractor. The ground between them was bare red dirt with no undergrowth, no fallen branches, nothing. It reminded me of pictures I'd seen of computer-generated forests. Technically accurate, but fundamentally wrong. I picked a direction that I thought might be west and started walking. For the first hour, nothing happened. I just walked through endless rows of pines, my boots crunching on the dirt. No birds, no insects, no wind. The silence was so complete it felt like a physical presence pressing against my eardrums. Then I found the first one. An RV. Same model as mine, same rental company logo on the side. It sat between two pines, perfectly parked, door hanging open. I approached cautiously. "Hello?" No answer. I looked inside. It was empty but lived in. Someone's clothes hung in the tiny closet. Dishes sat in the sink. A book lay open on the dinette table, a thriller about a serial killer. The bookmark was 3/4 through. On the wall above the bed, someone had carved words into the paneling with what looked like a knife. "The roads lie. The trees lie. I lie." I backed out of the RV and kept walking. Over the next few hours I found 7 more. All RVs, all the same model, all abandoned. Each one had its own carved message. How many times have I been here? I saw myself yesterday. The forest eats time. Which one am I? There is no west. Turn back before you become. The last one was never finished. Just turn back before you... And then the carving stopped. The knife apparently dropped mid-word. I should have stopped then. Should have gone back to my RV and... What? Given up? But I kept walking because stopping meant accepting this, and I wasn't ready for that. That's when I found the clearing. It was perfectly circular, maybe 50 feet across with the same bare red dirt. But in the center stood something that made my stomach lurch. A pile of me. Arms, legs, torsos, heads, all mine. All wearing variations of the clothes I'd brought on this trip. Some of the bodies were fresh, still pink. Others were old, mummified, dried out. They were stacked carelessly like cordwood. I counted at least 20 distinct corpses. I stood at the edge of the clearing, unable to move, unable to process what I was seeing. Then one of the heads at the bottom of the pile opened its eyes. "Run," it croaked. I ran. I crashed through the pines, no longer caring about direction or distance. Branches tore at my face and arms. Roots tried to trip me. The forest had dropped all pretense now. It wasn't hiding what it was anymore. The trees moved as I passed, shifting positions, blocking paths. The ground tilted beneath my feet like a ship's deck. The sky above flickered between day and night so fast it strobed. I don't know how long I ran. Time had stopped meaning anything. I burst into another clearing and skidded to a stop. My RV, the same one I'd left that morning. But it couldn't be. I'd been running away from it. I'd run in a straight line. Except I hadn't, had I? Because straight lines didn't exist here. I walked to the RV on legs that felt like rubber. The door was open. I climbed inside. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. My jacket on the hook, my coffee mug in the cup holder. Except for one thing. Someone sat at the dinette table. It looked like me, but not the smooth puppet version from before. This one looked hollow. Its skin hung loose like a deflated balloon. Its eyes were sunken pits. When it spoke, I could see that it had no tongue. "Welcome back," it said anyway, the words forming perfectly despite its lack of the necessary anatomy. "You made good time this loop." "What? What are you?" "I'm what you're becoming. What you've already become. What you've always been." It smiled, and its teeth fell out clattering on the table. "The forest is breaking you down, Justin, taking you apart piece by piece, trying to understand how you work. It does this to everyone who stays too long. It's curious, you see. It wants to know what makes things tick." I grabbed the hunting knife from my backpack. "Stay away from me." "Or what? You'll kill me?" "You can't kill what's already dead, and you can't leave what you're already inside." It stood up, and I heard things shifting around inside its loose skin. "You're in the digestive tract now, Justin. The forest swallowed you days ago. This is just processing." I didn't think. I lunged forward and drove the knife into its chest. Nothing happened. No blood. No pain on its face. The blade just sank in, like stabbing a pillow. It looked down at the knife, then back up at me. See? I yanked the knife out and stumbled backward out of the RV into the clearing. 3 other figures stood there now. All me. One was the puppet version from before. One was covered in dirt, like it had been buried. The third was on fire, flames licking across its skin, but it wasn't burning up. The fire just continued. "We're all you," they said in unison, their voices overlapping into a chorus. "All the iterations, all the loops. The forest is trying to figure out which version is real, which Justin is the prime Justin, the original." "I'm the original," I screamed. "Are you?" The burning one tilted its head. "How do you know? Maybe you're loop 47. Maybe you're loop 200. Maybe there never was an original. Maybe the forest made you up from scratch, assembled you from memories stolen from other people who came before." I ran again. This time I ran without direction, without purpose. I just ran because my body didn't know what else to do. The forest blurred around me. At some point the ground disappeared and I was running on nothing, on the space between spaces. I saw other clearings flash past, other RVs, other versions of myself doing other things. In one I was building something from bones. In another I was burying something. In a third I was just standing perfectly still, staring at nothing. Finally, I stopped running because my legs gave out. I collapsed onto dirt, or something like dirt, and lay there gasping. When I looked up, I was on a road. A real road. Paved. With a yellow line down the middle. Highway 165. I could see the ranger station in the distance, maybe a quarter-mile away. I'd made it out. I started laughing, a high, hysterical sound. I'd done it. I'd broken the loop. A silver Honda Accord drove past me. I watched it go, watched it signal, watched it turn into the ranger station parking lot, watched myself get out. I saw me walk into the station, saw me talk to Deirdre, saw her hand me a map, saw her trace a circle on it with her finger, saw me get back in the car and drive away, into the forest, into the loop. I stood up on shaking legs and walked toward the ranger station. When I got to the parking lot, my Accord was there, parked in the same spot where I'd watched myself park it. The keys sat on the hood. I picked them up. They were still warm. The door to the ranger station opened and Deirdre stepped out. She looked at me with those tired, frown-lined eyes. "You going in alone?" she asked. I just came from—" I pointed back toward the forest. "Phone service is spotty. Real spotty. And we've had some strange reports lately." She said it exactly the same way as before. Same words. Same inflection. People getting turned around. Coming out different places than they expected. One couple swore they drove the same stretch of road for 6 hours. Keep your wits about you. "Wait," I said. Don't you recognize me? I was just here. 2 days ago. 3 days. I don't know." She looked at me blankly. "First time I've seen you, hun. You feeling okay? Maybe you should rest before heading in." I looked down at my hands. They were clean, no dirt under the nails, no scratches from the branches. My clothes were fresh, like I'd just put them on this morning. "What day is it?" I asked. "October 15th. The same day I'd first arrived. I walked to my car like a zombie, got in, saw my sunglasses on the dashboard, the coffee stain on the passenger seat, started the engine. Leonard Skynyrd came on mid-song. That smell. I sat there, engine running, trying to understand. Maybe I'd never left. Maybe I'd been in the loop the whole time and just didn't realize it. Maybe I was about to drive back in and experience it all over again, thinking it was my first time. Maybe that's what loops did. They made you forget you were in them. Or maybe this was the original, and everything I remembered was the loop. Maybe I was about to experience it for the first time, and my memories of the forest and the puppet things and the pile of bodies were all just preview, fragments of a future that hadn't happened yet, but had already happened infinite times. I looked in the rearview mirror. A figure stood at the edge of the parking lot, at the point where the pavement met the trees. It looked like me. It waved. Then it turned and walked into the forest. I put the car in gear. My hands moved on their own, turning the wheel, pressing the gas. I drove out of the parking lot onto Highway 165, toward the turnoff that would take me to Forest Road 366. I knew what was waiting for me. The clearing, the footsteps, the thing that would wear my face, the endless driving, the pile of bodies, all of it. And I knew I was going to drive there anyway, because maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time I'd find the way out. Maybe this time I'd be the one who broke the loop. Maybe, but probably not. Probably I'd just drive and drive and drive until I ended up where I started, until I forgot I was driving at all, until I became just another face pressed against the window of someone else's RV, smiling that empty smile, waiting for my turn to wear flesh again. The dirt road to Kisatchie National Forest ended at my own car. It always does. It always will. I'm still driving. Story 2. I'm Naomi, 34. The stars at Devil's Den State Park spelled my death date. I saw it on the second night, lying flat on my back on the picnic table outside our rented RV, trying to shake off the tension that had been building since we arrived. The constellations had rearranged themselves into numbers, crisp, unmistakable digits glowing against the Arkansas sky. 10, 14, 2025. 2 days from now. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, told myself it was exhaustion, stress, the joint I'd smoked earlier. But when I looked again, the numbers held their shape, pulsing faintly like they were breathing. I didn't tell Marcus right away. How do you tell your boyfriend of 3 years that the universe just gave you an expiration date? We'd come to Devil's Den to fix things, or at least that's what I'd told myself when I'd agreed to this trip. Marcus had been distant for months, working late, phone always face down on the table, that guilty edge to his smile when I'd catch him staring at nothing. I'd suggested therapy. He'd suggested getting away from it all. So here we were, parked in a secluded spot near the Butterfield Nature Trail, surrounded by sandstone bluffs and oak hickory forest, the nearest other campers at least a quarter mile away through dense woods. The RV was a cramped 20-footer we'd borrowed from his brother, more rust than chrome, with a kitchenette that reeked of old grease and a bathroom so small you had to sit sideways on the toilet. But it had a bed, a propane stove, and 4 walls, which felt like luxury when you were trying to rebuild something broken. That first day had been nice enough. We'd hiked the Yellow Rock Trail, held hands on the overlook, watched the sun paint the valley below in shades of amber and rust. Marcus had even laughed at one of my stupid jokes, that genuine laugh I hadn't heard in months. For a few hours, I'd let myself believe we could actually fix this. Then night fell, and with it came the wrongness. It started with the sounds, or the lack of them. The forest had gone completely silent after sunset. No crickets, no owls, nothing. Just this suffocating quiet that seemed to press against my eardrums. Marcus said I was being paranoid, that I'd lived in the city too long and forgotten what real quiet sounded like. But this wasn't natural quiet. This was the kind of silence that came before something bad. I'd gone outside to smoke and look at the stars, needing space from the tiny RV and Marcus's forced cheerfulness, and that's when I'd seen the numbers. 10, 14, 2025. I went back inside, crawled into bed next to Marcus without saying anything. He was already asleep, or pretending to be. I lay there listening to his breathing and the absolute nothing outside, watching the cheap curtains for any hint of movement, any shadow that didn't belong. Sleep came eventually, but it brought dreams of falling, of dirt filling my mouth, of hands pulling me down into darkness that tasted like wet earth and copper. I woke to Marcus shaking my shoulder, his face pale in the weak morning light filtering through the dingy windows. Naomi, wake up. Something's wrong. I sat up, disoriented, my mouth dry and tasting like I'd actually been eating dirt. What time is it? 6:30. That's not... Look outside. I stumbled to the window and pulled back the curtain. Our campsite looked different in the daylight, but it took me a moment to understand why. The trees surrounding us had moved. Not drastically, but enough to notice. They'd closed in during the night, forming a tighter circle around the RV. The cleared space where we'd parked had shrunk by at least 10 feet on all sides. "That's impossible," I said, but my voice came out weak, uncertain. "I know it's impossible, but look at them. Look at the ground." He was right. The earth around the base of each tree was disturbed, pushed up in little mounds like something had been tunneling underneath, repositioning them. And the trees themselves, their branches all seemed to be reaching toward the RV, bent at angles that defied their natural growth patterns. "We should leave," I said. "It's probably just some weird optical illusion. Different light, different perspective in the morning." "Marcus, the fucking trees moved." "Trees don't move, Naomi." "Then explain what I'm looking at." He couldn't, of course. He stood there in his boxer shorts and ratty t-shirt, running his hands through his hair the way he always did when he was trying to logic his way out of acknowledging something uncomfortable. I'd seen him do it when I'd found texts from someone named Jessica on his phone. Seen him do it when I'd asked him point blank if he was cheating. He'd logicked his way around it then, too. Made me feel crazy for asking, for doubting. Maybe I was crazy. Maybe the stars hadn't spelled anything. Maybe the trees had always been this close and I just hadn't noticed in the dark yesterday. But I didn't believe that, and the knot of dread in my stomach told me something was very, very wrong with this place. "Let's just have breakfast and then take a day hike," Marcus said, already moving toward the kitchenette. "Clear our heads. I'll make those pancakes you like." I wanted to argue, to insist we pack up and leave immediately, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the desperate hope in his voice, the first real emotion I'd heard from him in weeks. Or maybe it was the way the morning light made everything seem less threatening, more manageable. Or maybe, and this thought sent ice down my spine, maybe I was curious about those numbers. Maybe some sick part of me wanted to see if they were right. We ate pancakes that tasted like cardboard. Marcus tried to make conversation about his work, about his brother's new boat, about anything except the trees that had rearranged themselves around us in the night. I watched him talk and realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd actually loved him. Not just loved the idea of us, the comfort of routine, the fear of starting over at 34. After breakfast, we set out on one of the shorter trails, the Devil's Den Trail Loop, just under 2 miles. Marcus had the map, which was stupid because he had terrible directional sense and I'd been the navigator on every trip we'd ever taken. But he'd insisted. Some alpha male bullshit about being in charge, and I was too tired to fight him. The trail was beautiful in that primal, unsettling way that deep forests can be. Massive boulders thrust up through the earth at odd angles, creating caves and crevasses that disappeared into shadow. The sandstone bluffs rose around us like ancient sentinels, their faces carved with centuries of water erosion. Thick vegetation crowded the path, and the canopy overhead was so dense it felt like walking through a green tunnel. We'd been hiking for maybe 20 minutes when I noticed the first marker. It was a small pile of stones, carefully stacked in a cairn sitting just off the trail to our right. Nothing unusual about that. Hikers left markers all the time, but this one had something on top of it that made my breath catch. A small piece of paper, folded and weighted down with a rock. "Don't," Marcus said when I moved toward it. "It's just a note. It's probably someone's geocache or something. Leave it alone." But I was already reaching for it, unfolding the damp paper with fingers that had started trembling for reasons I couldn't explain. The handwriting was neat, feminine, written in blue ink that had started to run from moisture. They count down. When you reach 0, you become part of the ground. Tell someone I was here. Tell them I tried to leave. Rachel H., 9/27/2025. "What is it?" Marcus asked. I handed it to him without speaking, watching his face as he read. He laughed, but it came out wrong, forced. "It's just some Blair Witch Project bullshit. Someone trying to freak out other hikers. It's dated 3 weeks ago, Marcus. So, could be from 3 years ago. Ink fades. That ink is fresh. Look at it." He crumpled the paper and threw it back toward the cairn. "Can we please just enjoy our hike without turning everything into some horror story? Jesus Christ, Naomi, you've been paranoid since we got here." "I'm not paranoid. Something is wrong with this place. The only thing wrong is your attitude. I thought this trip would help us, but you're determined to sabotage it." And there it was. The real Marcus. The one who'd emerged slowly over the past year, turning every concern I had into evidence of my own brokenness. I felt anger flare hot in my chest, but before I could respond, I heard it. A voice, distant but clear, calling from somewhere off the trail. "Hello? Is someone there? Please, I need help." It was a woman's voice, strained and desperate. Marcus and I locked eyes, our argument forgotten. "We should check on her," I said. "We should stay on the trail. Someone's hurt, Marcus. Listen to her." The voice came again, more urgent this time. "Please, I'm lost. I can't find the trail. Please help me." Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, but we stay close to the path, and we're quick." We pushed through the underbrush following the voice. It seemed to be coming from behind a particularly large outcropping of sandstone, maybe 50 yards off the trail. The vegetation was thick here, grabbing at our clothes, our hair. Branches seemed to reach for us deliberately, scratching exposed skin. "Hello?" I called out. "Keep talking so we can find you." "I'm here, behind the rocks. Please hurry." We rounded the outcropping and found nothing. No woman, no hiker, no signs that anyone had been there at all. Just more forest, more rocks, more oppressive green shadow. "What the fuck?" Marcus breathed. The voice came again, but now it was behind us, back toward where we'd come from. "Why did you leave me? Come back. Please come back." My skin crawled. The voice sounded exactly the same urgency, same desperation, but it had moved. Impossibly moved. "We're going back to the RV," I said. "Right now." Marcus didn't argue this time. We crashed back through the underbrush, branches whipping our faces, roots trying to trip us. The forest seemed to fight our passage, everything tangling, everything in the way. When we finally broke back onto the trail, we were both bleeding from dozens of small cuts, breathing hard, our hearts hammering. "Which way?" Marcus asked, and I heard the panic in his voice because we'd gotten turned around. The trail looked the same in both directions, and I couldn't remember which way we'd come from. I pulled out my phone to check the compass app. No signal, which I'd expected, but the compass was spinning wildly, unable to fix on magnetic north. The screen flickered, and for just a second, text appeared. 2 days. I showed Marcus. His face went gray. "We follow the trail markers," he said. "They'll lead us back to the loop." But when we started walking, we realized the markers were wrong. Every tree that should have had a painted blaze was blank. The trail signs we'd passed on the way out had vanished. It was as if the forest had swallowed all evidence that humans had ever been here. We walked for what felt like hours, the trail winding back on itself, taking us past the same formations we'd already seen. That distinctive split boulder, we passed it 3 times. The dead tree shaped like a grasping hand. We saw it over and over from different angles. "We're going in circles," I said. "That's impossible. We've been following the trail." "Look around you, Marcus. We've been here before. Multiple times." He stopped walking and turned to face me, and something in his expression made me take a step back. His eyes looked wrong, darker than they should be, too wide, not quite focused on me. "Maybe we have been here before," he said softly. "Maybe we've always been here. Maybe we never left." "What are you talking about? Don't you feel it, Naomi? The way this place wants us? The way it's been waiting? You're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared. We both should be. But it's too late now. Don't you see? We're already part of it." He turned and kept walking, and I had no choice but to follow because being alone out here was worse than being with Marcus, even if he was saying crazy things. We finally found our way back to the RV as the sun was setting, though I couldn't explain how. The trail simply deposited us at the edge of our campsite, as if the forest had tired of toying with us. The trees had moved again, closer still, their branches now touching the RV's roof, scraping against the aluminum siding when the wind blew. Marcus went inside without a word. I stood there in the gathering dusk, looking up at the stars beginning to emerge, knowing what I would see. The numbers were still there, still crystal clear. 10, 14, 20-25. Tomorrow. I thought about Rachel H. and her note. about counting down, about becoming part of the ground. Inside, Marcus was sitting at the small dinette table, his head in his hands. I noticed things then that I'd been too preoccupied to see before. The way his clothes were stained with something that looked like old blood, dried and brown. The way his fingernails were black with dirt, soil wedged so deep it looked like it had been there for days. The way his skin had taken on a grayish pallor in the RV's fluorescent light. "Marcus, what happened to you today?" He looked up, and his eyes were completely black. No whites, no irises, just solid darkness reflecting the light like oil slicks. "I remembered," he said. "I remembered what I did." "What are you talking about?" "Jessica. You were right about Jessica, but it wasn't what you thought. It was worse. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. What did you do? She wanted me to leave you. Kept pushing, kept demanding, so I brought her here, 6 months ago, told her we'd go camping, talk things through, and the forest showed me what to do. It's been showing people what to do for a long time." I backed toward the door, but my hand missed the handle. My whole body had gone numb. "There's a cave," Marcus continued, his voice flat, empty. "About a mile north of here. The darkness there is different. Hungry. It ate her while she was still screaming, pulled her down into the ground. And I felt better. Lighter. Like I'd finally solved a problem." "You're lying. You're trying to scare me." I buried her phone near the trailhead. Her car I drove to Little Rock and left in long-term parking at the airport. Everyone thinks she ran away, started a new life somewhere. But she's here, under the ground, and she's not alone. He stood up, and I noticed he was taller than he should be, like his spine had lengthened, his proportions stretched wrong. "The forest chose this place a long time ago," he said. "Something about the mineral content in the rocks, the way water flows through the sandstone. It feeds on what's buried here, grows them like seeds. And when you're ready, when you've got that darkness inside you that needs releasing, it shows you where to plant." I finally found the door handle, yanked it open, stumbled out into the night. The cold air hit my face like a slap, and I ran, crashed through the circle of relocated trees, branches tearing at my clothes, my hair, my skin. Behind me, I heard Marcus call out, but his voice was wrong. Layered, multiple voices speaking in unison. Words in a language I didn't understand but felt in my bones. I ran without direction, without thought, just pure animal panic driving my legs. The forest was alive with movement now, shapes shifting between the trees, following me, pacing me. I caught glimpses of faces in the bark, mouths opening in silent screams, eyes watching from knotholes. The ground began to slope upward, and I realized I was climbing one of the bluffs. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop, because I could feel them behind me. Not just Marcus, but others. The ones who'd been planted here, the ones who'd become part of the ground. I reached the top of the bluff, a rocky outcropping with nowhere else to go except down. I spun around, my back to the drop, and watched them emerge from the tree line. Marcus came first, but he wasn't Marcus anymore. His body had twisted, lengthened, his arms hanging too long, his fingers stretching into root-like tendrils. Behind him came others, men, women, even children, all of them transformed, all of them wearing that same grayish pallor, that same black-eyed stare. And at the center of them, I saw her, a young woman with dark hair, her clothes rotted and torn, soil caking her skin. She looked at me with something like recognition, something like pity. Rachel H., I thought, the note writer, still counting down even after reaching 0. "It doesn't hurt," Marcus said, his voice that awful chorus. "That's what she wants you to know. When you go into the ground, when you become part of it, there's no pain, just connection, just forever." "Stay back," I said, but my voice was barely a whisper. "Look up, Naomi. Look at what the stars told you." I didn't want to look, didn't want to confirm what I already knew. But my eyes betrayed me, lifted to the night sky, and there they were. The numbers, burning brighter than before. 10, 14/2025. Today. It was past midnight now. This was the day I was supposed to die. We can be together, Marcus said, stepping closer. Really together. Not like before, not that broken thing we were, but whole, eternal, fed by the same soil, drinking from the same water table, our roots intertwined forever. You're insane. You killed someone. You killed Jessica. I gave her to the forest, and the forest gave her purpose. Like it'll give you purpose. Like it gave me purpose when I came here as a child, when I first heard it calling. I always knew I'd come back. I always knew I'd bring someone with me. Understanding crashed over me like ice water. This whole trip, it had never been about fixing us. It had been about this, about delivering me to whatever lived in this place, whatever turned people into twisted things that grew from the ground like corrupted plants. You brought me here to kill me. I brought you here to transform you. There's a difference. They moved closer, their approach synchronized, their movements fluid in a way that human bodies shouldn't move. I could smell them now. Dirt and decay and something chemical, like formaldehyde mixed with rotting flowers. I had two choices. Let them take me or jump. The bluff behind me was maybe 50 feet down to a rock-strewn slope. I'd break bones at best, die on impact at worst, but at least I'd die as myself. At least I wouldn't end up like them, like Rachel, like Jessica, rooted in poisoned ground for whatever passed for eternity in this cursed place. I climbed onto the rock at the edge, my arms spread for balance. "Don't," Marcus said, and for just a second I heard his real voice underneath the chorus, the man I'd once loved, terrified and trapped. "Please, don't leave me here alone. Please don't make me be this thing without you." "You already are this thing," I said. "You have been for months, maybe years." And then I jumped. The fall seemed to last forever and no time at all. I had a moment of crystalline clarity where I could see everything. The forest spread out below me, vast and ancient and hungry, the things that had once been people, watching from the bluff edge. The stars overhead, their numbers fading as if satisfied with their prophecy fulfilled one way or another. I hit the slope hard, my right leg snapping on impact, pain exploding up my body in a white-hot wave. I tumbled, rolled, crashed through undergrowth and over smaller rocks, my body collecting damage with every revolution. When I finally stopped, I was at the bottom of the bluff, barely conscious, tasting blood, unable to move my right leg or left arm. But I was alive. Broken, but alive. I could hear them coming down, more carefully than I had, taking the longer trail that switchbacked down the bluff face. I had maybe 5 minutes before they reached me. I dragged myself forward using my good arm, inch by agonizing inch, not knowing where I was going, just knowing I had to move, had to try. My phone was miraculously still in my pocket, the screen cracked but functioning. Still no signal, but the compass was working now, pointing steadily north, away from the campsite, away from Devil's Den. I crawled. It was the most painful thing I'd ever experienced, every movement sending lightning bolts of agony through my shattered leg, my dislocated shoulder grinding in its socket. But I crawled. I don't know how long it took. Hours, maybe. The forest around me stayed dark, but I could feel dawn approaching, that subtle shift in the quality of darkness that happens before sunrise. And as it got lighter, I noticed the trees were thinning. The oppressive weight of the place was lifting. Behind me, I could still hear them searching, calling my name in that terrible chorus, but their voices were growing fainter, like they couldn't follow me beyond a certain boundary. I found a service road as the sun was rising. Gravel, rutted, clearly not used often, but it was man-made, and it led somewhere. I pulled myself onto it and kept going, every movement an act of pure will over pain. A ranger truck found me 3 hours later. I was delirious by then, dehydrated, going into shock. I remember telling them about Marcus, about the things in the forest, about the numbers and the stars. They listened with the patient sympathy of people who deal with injured hikers who've hit their heads. They found the RV right where we'd left it, the trees around it perfectly normal, spaced exactly as they'd always been. They found no sign of Marcus. No footprints, no trail, nothing. It was like he'd simply vanished. When I told them about Jessica, about what Marcus had claimed to do, they took me seriously enough to search. They found her phone where Marcus had said, near a trailhead, buried in a shallow hole. They found her car at the Little Rock airport, but they never found her body. The cave Marcus described doesn't officially exist, but when I pulled up satellite imagery later from my hospital bed, I could see it. A dark opening in the sandstone, about a mile north of where we'd camped, partially hidden by overgrowth. And around it, if you knew what to look for, you could see areas where the vegetation grew differently, lusher and darker, circular patches maybe 6 feet in diameter each, like grave plots, like gardens. I spent 6 weeks in the hospital, multiple surgeries on my leg, my shoulder, my ribs, physical therapy that hurt worse than the original injuries, psych evaluations where I learned to say the right things, that I'd been confused, delirious from pain and fear, that Marcus must have left me and gotten lost himself, that I'd imagined the rest. They declared him missing, presumed dead. Searched for weeks and found nothing. His family blamed me, said I must have done something, known something. Jessica's family hired a private investigator who looked at me with unconcealed suspicion every time we spoke, but they never found proof. Because the proof was buried in ground that wouldn't give up its secrets, fed by whatever lived in that place, transformed into something that wasn't human anymore but wasn't quite plant either. I'm writing this from a motel room in Oklahoma, 6 months later. I left Arkansas as soon as I could walk without crutches, but it doesn't matter. I see the numbers everywhere now, in license plates, in digital clocks, in the way shadows fall across walls. Different numbers, but always counting down. 3 days, 2 days, 1 day, 0. And when I reach 0, I find myself drawn back. Not to Devil's Den. They've blocked off the area where we camped. Too many incidents, too many disappearances, but to other places. Dark places. Places where the ground feels wrong and the trees grow too close and the stars rearrange themselves into messages for people who are already marked. I don't know if I'm infected, or chosen, or cursed. I don't know if what Marcus became was what he'd always been, or if the forest changed him, or if it just revealed what was already there, sleeping. But I know I can't stop moving, because when I stay still too long, I feel it. The pull of the earth, the hunger in the soil, roots reaching up through the ground beneath my feet, trying to grab hold. And I know that one day the countdown will reach 0 and I won't run. I'll stand there and let it happen. Let the ground open and pull me down. Let the transformation take hold. Because the worst part isn't the horror of what Marcus became, or the guilt over Jessica, or the constant pain in my leg where the bones healed wrong. The worst part is that sometimes, late at night when I'm alone, I understand what he meant about connection, about being whole, about roots intertwined forever. The worst part is that sometimes I want it. I saw Rachel's name carved in a tree yesterday, miles from Devil's Den in a forest that shouldn't know her. And beneath it, fresh letters someone had added, "They're spreading." So I keep moving, keep running, keep pretending that if I never stop, the ground can never claim me. But I feel it getting closer every day. That boundary between what I am and what I'm becoming wearing thinner. The stars tonight show new numbers. But I'm not looking up anymore. I'm afraid of what they'll say. Story 3. My name is Luke. I'm 34, and I brought my wife, Rachel, and our 7-year-old daughter, Emma, to Devil's Creek Recreation Area in the Mark Twain National Forest of southern Missouri, because I thought 3 days away from screens and schedules would help us reconnect. I'd read about the place online, secluded campsites along a narrow creek valley, hiking trails that wound through oak and hickory forests, and total silence after dark. The photos showed RVs parked beneath cathedral-like canopies of old-growth trees, campfires reflected in dark water, families roasting marshmallows. It looked like peace. It looked like exactly what we needed after the year we'd had. Rachel's mother passing in February, my layoff in April. Emma's nightmares that started around the same time and never quite stopped. The doctors said she was processing grief. I thought maybe the forest would give her something else to think about. We arrived on a Thursday afternoon in late September, pulling our 26-foot Winnebago down a gravel road that seemed to narrow with every turn. The trees pressed close on both sides, their branches scraping the roof like fingernails on metal. Rachel sat in the passenger seat with a map spread across her lap, though the map was nearly useless. Most of the trails and campsites weren't marked, just vague dotted lines that could have meant anything. Emma sat in the back, her face pressed to the window, watching the forest slide past in shadows and shifting light. "Are we almost there?" Emma asked for the third time in 10 minutes. "Almost, sweetheart," I said, though I wasn't sure. The GPS had stopped working about 5 miles back, the screen frozen on a blue dot hovering over blank space. My phone had no signal. Rachel's phone was dead. We were navigating by instinct now, following the signs that appeared every mile or so. Devil's Creek Recreation Area. 3 miles, then 2 miles, then 1. The campground appeared suddenly, a clearing carved from the forest like a wound. There were 6 sites total, each with a concrete pad, a fire ring, and a picnic table weathered gray by seasons of rain and sun. Only one other site was occupied, a silver Airstream parked at the far end, its windows dark, no movement visible inside. The rest of the campground was empty. I'd expected more people, even in late September. The website said the area was popular year-round. "Kinda quiet," Rachel said, her voice uncertain. "That's what we wanted, right? Quiet." She nodded, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped the map a little too tightly. She'd been nervous about this trip from the start, worried about being too far from a hospital, too far from help if something happened. I'd reassured her over and over. We had a first aid kit, a satellite phone for emergencies, enough food and water for a week. We'd be fine. I backed the RV into site number 4, the one closest to the creek. Through the trees, I could see water moving, dark and sluggish, reflecting the sky like oil. The sound of it was constant, a low murmur beneath the rustle of leaves and the creak of branches. Emma was out of the RV before I'd even cut the engine, running toward the water with her arms spread wide. "Stay where I can see you," Rachel called after her, but Emma was already gone, disappearing into the undergrowth at the forest's edge. "She'll be fine," I said, though my own stomach tightened watching her vanish. "Let's get set up." We spent the next hour leveling the RV, connecting the water and power, arranging our camp chairs around the fire ring. The sun was starting to set, the light turning golden and then amber, the shadows stretching long and thin across the clearing. Birds called from the trees. Or I thought they were birds. The sounds were strange, high-pitched and rhythmic, almost like laughter. I'd never heard birds laugh before. Rachel was inside unpacking groceries when I walked down to the creek to check on Emma. I found her crouched at the water's edge, her hands in the mud, staring at something I couldn't see. "What'd you find, kiddo?" She didn't answer right away. She just kept staring, her face pale in the fading light. When she finally looked up at me, her eyes were wide and dark. "The birds, Daddy." "What about them?" "They're flying into the ground." I laughed, thinking she was playing pretend, the way she sometimes did. But then I looked where she was pointing, and my breath caught. About 20 feet downstream, near a bend in the creek, I saw them. Birds, dozens of them. They were circling above a patch of bare earth near the water, their movements slow and deliberate, almost mechanical. And, one by one, they were diving. Not toward the ground. Into it. I watched as a robin dropped from the circle, folding its wings tight against its body and plunged head first into the dirt. There was no sound of impact, no struggle. The bird just disappeared, swallowed by the earth like it had never existed. Then another bird dove. Then another. "What the hell?" I whispered. Emma stood up, wiping her muddy hands on her jeans. "Can we go back now?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to grab her hand and pull her away from the creek, back to the RV where Rachel was humming softly to herself, arranging cans of soup in the cupboard, pretending everything was normal, but I couldn't move. I stood there watching the birds dive, one after another, until the circle above the bare earth grew smaller and smaller, and finally there were no birds left. Just the empty sky and the patch of disturbed ground, raw and dark like a scab. "Daddy?" "Yeah," I said, my voice hoarse. "Yeah, let's go back." We walked back to the RV in silence. I didn't tell Rachel what we'd seen. I didn't know how to explain it, and I didn't want to worry her. She was already on edge, glancing toward the airstream every few minutes like she expected someone to emerge and tell us to leave. But the airstream stayed dark and silent, and by the time full night fell, I'd almost convinced myself that what I'd seen at the creek was some kind of optical illusion, a trick of the light and the water. We ate dinner around the campfire, hot dogs and beans, marshmallows for dessert. Emma was quiet, barely touching her food, her eyes darting toward the forest every time a branch snapped or the wind picked up. Rachel tried to coax her into talking, asking about school and friends and the new book she'd been reading, but Emma just shrugged and stared into the flames. "You okay, sweetheart?" Rachel asked, reaching across to touch Emma's hand. Emma pulled away. "I don't like it here." "Why not?" "It's too quiet." Rachel and I exchanged a glance. The forest around us was anything but quiet. The creek burbled and hissed. The trees groaned in the wind. And beneath it all, there was another sound, so faint I almost missed it. A rhythmic scraping, like something digging. "It's just different from home," I said, forcing a smile. "You'll get used to it." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. We put Emma to bed around 9, tucking her into the small bunk at the back of the RV. She clung to Rachel's hand, her fingers tight and cold. "Will you stay with me?" "Of course," Rachel said, brushing hair from Emma's forehead. "I'll be right here." But Emma shook her head. "No, I mean stay. Don't leave." "We're not leaving, honey. We're just outside." "Promise." "Promise." Emma's eyes searched Rachel's face, looking for something I couldn't name. Finally, she nodded and rolled over, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Rachel stayed with her until her breathing evened out, then slipped out of the bunk and joined me by the fire. "She's scared," Rachel said quietly. "I know. Maybe we should leave in the morning. We just got here. Luke, she's terrified. Look at her." I wanted to argue, to say that Emma was just adjusting, that she'd feel better after a good night's sleep. But the truth was, I was starting to feel it too, the weight of the forest pressing in, the wrongness that seemed to seep from the trees like sap, the birds diving into the ground, the scraping sound that hadn't stopped since the sun went down. "One more day," I said. "If she's still upset tomorrow, we'll pack up and go." Rachel nodded, though I could see the doubt in her eyes. We sat by the fire for another hour, not talking, just listening to the forest and the creek and the scraping that seemed to be getting louder, closer. Finally, Rachel stood. "I'm going to bed. I'll be there in a minute." She disappeared into the RV, and I was alone with the fire and the darkness. I added another log to the flames, watching sparks spiral up into the night. The stars overhead were impossibly bright, sharp as a broken glass, and for a moment I felt dizzy, like I was falling upward into all that light and cold. That's when I saw it. Movement at the edge of the clearing, near the tree line. A shape, pale and hunched, moving in short, jerky steps. I stood, my heart hammering, and called out, "Hello!" The shape stopped, turned, and I saw its face. It wasn't human. The proportions were wrong. Eyes too large, mouth too wide, skin stretched tight over bones that jutted at odd angles. But it was wearing clothes. A flannel shirt and jeans, both filthy and torn, and it was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Hunger, maybe, or curiosity. "Who are you?" I called, my voice cracking. The thing tilted its head and I heard a sound like laughter, high-pitched and rhythmic, just like the birds. Then it turned and walked into the forest, moving with that same jerky, broken gait. I watched until it disappeared into the trees, and then I ran to the RV, slammed the door behind me, and locked it. Rachel was already in bed, her eyes closed. I climbed in beside her, my hands shaking, my breath coming in short gasps. I wanted to wake her, to tell her what I'd seen, but what would I say? That I'd seen something that looked like a person but wasn't? That the forest was full of things that laughed like birds and walked like broken puppets? She'd think I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. I lay there in the dark, listening to Rachel's breathing and Emma's soft murmurs from the bunk, and I tried to convince myself that it had been nothing. A trick of the firelight. An animal. A person from the airstream, out for a walk. But I knew better. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark with my eyes open, listening to the scraping sound that never stopped, and the laughter that seemed to echo from every direction at once. And sometime around 3 a.m, I heard something else. A soft tapping at the RV door, like fingers drumming against metal. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just lay there and waited for whatever was outside to go away. It didn't. The tapping continued for hours, rhythmic and patient, until the first light of dawn crept through the windows and the sound finally stopped. When I got up, Rachel and Emma were still asleep. I unlocked the door, stepped outside, and looked down. There were footprints in the dirt around the RV, small, barefoot prints like a child's. They circled the vehicle 3 times, then led off toward the creek, disappearing into the undergrowth. Jesus Christ, I whispered. I should have woken Rachel. I should have packed up right then and driven out of Devil's Creek as fast as the RV would go. But I didn't. Because part of me, the stupid, stubborn part that had insisted we come here in the first place, wanted to believe there was a rational explanation. Kids from another campsite. A prank. Something normal. I followed the footprints. They led me down to the creek, to the same spot where Emma and I had seen the birds. The bare patch of earth was bigger now, wider and deeper, like something had been digging from underneath. And in the center of the patch, half buried in the dirt, was a hand. Small, pale, a child's hand. I stumbled backward, bile rising in my throat. The hand twitched, fingers curling and uncurling, and I realized with horror that it was moving. Not just twitching, reaching. The dirt around it shifted, and I saw more of the arm, the shoulder, the head emerging from the ground like a corpse clawing its way out of a grave. But it wasn't a corpse. Its eyes were open, staring at me with that same wrong expression I'd seen on the thing by the fire. And it was smiling. I ran. Back to the RV, my lungs burning, my vision blurring with panic. I burst through the door and found Rachel standing in the kitchen making coffee, her face calm and rested. "Morning," she said. "Sleep okay?" I couldn't answer. I just stood there gasping, my hands braced against the counter. "Luke, what's wrong? We have to leave, right now." "What? Why?" "There's something out there, in the forest. I stopped, the words catching in my throat. How could I explain what I'd seen? She'd never believe me. "Please, Rachel, trust me. We need to go." She set down her coffee mug, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm. Okay, we'll go. Let me wake Emma." But when she opened the door to the bunk, Emma wasn't there. The blanket was thrown back, the pillow dented where her head had been, but the bed was empty. Rachel called her name, her voice rising with panic. I tore through the RV, checking every corner, every cabinet, every impossible place a 7-year-old could hide. She wasn't there. She must have gone outside, Rachel said, her face white. Maybe she went to the bathroom. We didn't have a bathroom, not a real one. There was an outhouse near the airstream, but Emma hated it, said it smelled like death. She wouldn't have gone there alone. We split up, Rachel heading toward the outhouse while I ran back to the creek. The sun was higher now, bright and hot, but the forest seemed darker than before, the shadows thicker, more deliberate. I called Emma's name over and over, my voice echoing back at me in strange, distorted waves. I found her shoes first, both of them, placed neatly side by side at the edge of the bare patch of earth. Then her jacket, folded carefully on a rock, and finally, in the center of the patch, where the child's hand had been, I saw her, or what used to be her. Emma was sitting cross-legged in the dirt, her back to me, her head tilted at an angle that made my stomach drop. She was humming something, a lullaby maybe, or a nursery rhyme, but the tune was wrong, the notes bending and warping like they were being played backward. "Emma?" I whispered. She stopped humming, turned her head, and when I saw her face, I knew she was gone. Her eyes were black from corner to corner, no white visible, no iris, just empty darkness. Her mouth stretched into a smile far too wide, showing teeth that were too sharp, too many, and when she spoke, her voice wasn't hers. "Daddy," she said in a voice like grinding stone. "The birds showed me." "Showed you what?" "How to go down." She turned back to the dirt, and I saw that she was digging, her small hands moving in frantic circles, scooping up handfuls of earth and tossing them aside. And beneath the dirt, something was moving, writhing, dozens of shapes, pale and wrong, crawling over each other like maggots in a wound. I grabbed her by the shoulders, tried to pull her away, but she was stronger than she should have been. She twisted in my grip, her head swiveling all the way around like an owl's, and she laughed. That same high-pitched rhythmic laugh I'd heard from the birds and the thing by the fire. "Let go," I shouted, but she wouldn't, or couldn't. Her fingers dug into the earth, and I watched in horror as she started to sink. Not falling, sinking, like the ground was swallowing her whole. I pulled harder, my hand slipping on her arms, her skin cold and slick, and for a moment I thought I had her. But then she was gone, sucked down into the dirt, and I was left holding nothing but her shirt. "Emma!" I dug. I tore at the earth with my bare hands, my fingernails breaking, blood mixing with the dirt. But there was nothing beneath the surface. No tunnel, no hole, no body. Just solid earth, packed tight and hard as stone. "Emma!" I don't know how long I knelt there, screaming her name into the dirt. Long enough for Rachel to find me, her face twisted with grief and confusion. Long enough for the sun to reach its peak and start its descent. Long enough for the forest to grow quiet, the scraping sound finally stopping, the laughter fading to nothing. Rachel tried to pull me away, tried to get me to stand, but I couldn't. I couldn't leave her. Not there. Not in the ground. "Luke," Rachel sobbed, her hands on my shoulders. "Luke, we have to call someone. We have to—" "There's no one to call," I said, my voice flat and dead. "She's gone." No, she's not gone. She's lost. She wandered off. We'll find her." But we both knew the truth. We'd seen her shoes, her jacket, the empty space where she'd been. We'd heard the laughter. We searched until dark, then through the night, using flashlights and shouting her name until our voices gave out. The rangers came at dawn, brought in search dogs and volunteers. They combed the forest for 3 days, searching every trail, every ravine, every hollow. They found nothing. No trace of Emma. No sign she'd ever been there at all. The rangers said she must have drowned, that the creek was deceptive, deeper than it looked, the current strong enough to pull a child under. They said her body would turn up downstream eventually. They said we should go home, try to grieve, let them do their job. But I knew better. On the 4th day, I went back to the creek alone. The bare patch of earth was still there, bigger now, a gaping wound in the forest floor. And in the center, half buried in the dirt, was a shoe. Emma's shoe. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands. It was clean, pristine, like she'd just taken it off. And from somewhere beneath the ground, I heard laughter. We left Devil's Creek that afternoon, driving out in silence, the Winnebago's engine grinding against the steep hills. Rachel sat beside me, her face turned to the window, tears streaming down her cheeks. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her it would be okay, but I didn't have the words. How could I explain what had happened? How could I tell her that our daughter hadn't wandered off or drowned, but had been taken by something we didn't understand, pulled down into the earth by forces we couldn't name? We drove straight through, 18 hours without stopping, until we reached our house in the suburbs and the familiar, suffocating normalcy of our old lives. Rachel called the police, filed missing person reports, held press conferences with Emma's photo blown up on poster boards, but I knew it was useless. Emma was gone. Not dead, gone. Taken somewhere we couldn't follow. It's been 6 months now. The nightmares haven't stopped. Every night I dream of the creek, the birds diving into the ground. Emma's face turning to look at me with those black, empty eyes. And every morning, I wake up to find dirt under my fingernails, no matter how many times I wash my hands. Rachel left me 2 months ago. Said she couldn't be around me anymore. Couldn't stand the way I stared at the floor like I was waiting for something to claw its way up. She's probably right. I'm not the same person I was before Devil's Creek. None of us are. Last week, I got a call from the Mark Twain National Forest. They said they'd found something. Human remains, buried near the creek. Small. A child's bones, arranged in a circle surrounded by hundreds of bird skeletons. They asked me to come identify them, to tell them if it was Emma. I said no, because I know it's not her. The thing in the ground isn't my daughter. It's wearing her bones, her skin, but it's not her. And if I go back there, if I set foot in that forest again, it won't just be Emma's bones in the dirt. So I stay here, in this house full of empty rooms and unopened boxes, and I wait. Because sometimes, late at night, I hear tapping at the door. Soft and rhythmic, like small fingers drumming against wood. And when I look outside, I see footprints in the dew, circling the house 3 times before leading away into the dark. She's still there, still calling, and one day, I know, I'll follow. Story 4. My name is Faith. I'm 34. The silence at Devil's Den State Park said my name out loud. I should have known better than to come here alone. My therapist said I needed to reconnect with myself, whatever the hell that meant. 3 months after the divorce, 2 months after losing my job at the architecture firm, and 1 month after my sister stopped returning my calls, I'd bought a used RV with money I couldn't afford to spend and pointed it toward the Ozark Mountains of Arkansas. Devil's Den seemed like the perfect place to disappear for a week. Isolated, primitive, far from anyone who knew me or my failures. The RV was a 1997 Winnebago Brave, cream-colored with rust eating through the wheel wells. The previous owner, a man named Earl with tobacco-stained teeth, had assured me it ran just fine, despite the ominous grinding noise the engine made whenever I pushed past 55. The interior smelled like old coffee and something vaguely organic I couldn't identify, but it had a working stove, a tiny bathroom, and a bed that folded down from the wall. That was all I needed. I arrived at Devil's Den on a Tuesday afternoon in late October, when the leaves had turned that particular shade of dying amber that makes everything look like it's already been embalmed. The park ranger who checked me in was a woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled back so tight it gave her a permanent look of surprise. Her name tag said, "Marjorie, you're in Site 47, she said, handing me a photocopied map with my spot circled in red. End of the road, backing up to the Butterfield Nature Trail. Pretty isolated out there." "That's exactly what I want," I said. Marjorie studied me for a moment, her eyes lingering on my face in a way that made me uncomfortable. "You alone?" "Yes." "No cell service once you get past Site 30. Radio's sketchy, too. You got supplies? Water?" "Plenty." She nodded slowly, still watching me with that unsettling intensity. "Weather's supposed to turn tonight. Cold front coming through. You picked an interesting time to visit." "Interesting how?" "Just interesting." She handed me a laminated card with emergency numbers. "Park closes at dusk. No one comes or goes after that. Gates lock automatically." I took the card and the map, eager to end the conversation. Marjorie's stare had developed a quality I couldn't quite name. Not hostile, but not friendly either. Knowing, maybe. Like she could see something about me I'd worked hard to hide. Site 47 was exactly as promised. A small clearing at the end of a narrow gravel road, surrounded by dense forest on 3 sides. The Butterfield Nature Trail began just beyond my campsite, marked by a weathered wooden sign barely visible through the undergrowth. I backed the RV into position with considerable difficulty. The grinding noise got worse every time I shifted gears, and finally killed the engine. The silence that followed was total. I sat in the driver's seat for a full minute, listening. No birds, no insects, no wind rustling through the leaves. Just nothing. A complete absence of sound that felt almost physical, like stepping into a vacuum. My ears rang with it. Then I heard it, faint, Barely more than a breath, but unmistakable. Faith. My own name, spoken in a voice that might have been the wind or might have been something else entirely. I jerked around, scanning the tree line through the RV's grimy windows. Nothing moved. The forest stood perfectly still, every tree and branch frozen like a photograph. I must have imagined it. Stress, exhaustion, the emotional wreckage of the past few months manifesting as auditory hallucinations. That's what my therapist would have said. I forced myself to breathe normally and climbed out of the driver's seat. The RV's door stuck when I tried to open it, swollen from humidity or age. I had to throw my shoulder against it twice before it finally gave way with a sound like tearing fabric. The air outside hit me immediately, cold, much colder than it should have been for October in Arkansas, and carrying a smell I couldn't quite place. Not decay, exactly. More like the smell of old ice, if ice could go stale. I spent the next hour setting up camp, though there wasn't much to do. I extended the RV's awning, arranged my folding chair and small table outside, and started the generator so I could run the space heater. The temperature had dropped at least 10 degrees since I'd arrived, and the sun was already sinking toward the horizon, turning the sky the color of a bruise. That's when I noticed the trees. Every single one of them, oak, hickory, pine, was leaning slightly toward my campsite. Not dramatically, just a few degrees off vertical, but all in the same direction, as if they'd spent years growing toward this specific spot and whatever occupied it. I walked to the edge of the clearing and looked up, following the angle of their trunks. They framed my RV perfectly, creating a natural amphitheater with my home for the week at its center stage. Faith. I spun around so fast I nearly lost my balance. The voice had come from behind me, from the direction of the trail. Louder this time, clearer. A woman's voice, though I couldn't identify the register or accent. It simply said my name, nothing more. Hello. My voice sounded thin and reedy in the growing darkness. Is someone there? No response. The silence rushed back in, overwhelming, oppressive. I walked quickly back to the RV and locked myself inside, my heart hammering against my ribs. Probably just another camper, I told myself. Someone hiking the trail, calling out to a friend or family member who happened to share my name. Coincidence? Nothing more. But I knew that wasn't true. I'd felt it in my bones, in that ancient part of the brain that still remembers what it's like to be prey. Whatever had spoken my name wasn't human. I tried to eat dinner, a can of soup heated on the RV's tiny stove, but my appetite had vanished. The space heater rattled and hummed, struggling against the cold that seemed to seep through the RV's thin walls like water through paper. Outside the windows, full darkness had fallen, and the forest had become a wall of black broken only by the feeble glow of my exterior light. Around 8 o'clock, I heard footsteps. They circled the RV slowly, methodically, making a complete revolution every 2 or 3 minutes. Not the random wandering of an animal, but the deliberate patrol of something intelligent. Something checking the doors, the windows, looking for a way in. I sat, frozen on the fold-out bed, clutching a flashlight I hadn't yet turned on, listening to those measured steps crunch through the fallen leaves. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Around the front, past the driver's side, behind me now, just outside the back wall, then along the passenger side, returning to the front to begin again. Faith. The voice came from directly outside the door, so close I could have reached out and touched whoever, or whatever, had spoken, if only a few inches of aluminum and wood hadn't separated us. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but sit there and listen as the footsteps resumed their circuit. This continued for 3 hours. At some point I must have fallen asleep, because I woke with a jolt to find gray dawn light filtering through the windows and my neck cramped from sleeping upright against the wall. The space heater had died during the night, and my breath formed small clouds in the frigid air. Every muscle in my body ached, and my head felt stuffed with cotton. I forced myself to stand and look outside. The clearing appeared exactly as it had yesterday. Nothing disturbed, no tracks visible in the dirt, no sign that anything had spent half the night walking circles around my temporary home. Maybe I'd dreamed it. Maybe the stress and isolation had triggered some kind of episode, and I'd imagined the whole thing. Then I saw the marks on the door. 5 long scratches carved deep into the aluminum, running from the top of the door to about waist height. They looked like they'd been made by fingernails, but no human nail could have gouged that deep. I reached out to touch them, and my finger came away with something dark and flaky under the tip. I smelled it without thinking. Iron and rot, and that same stale ice smell from yesterday. I should have left. Right then, that moment, I should have cranked the engine and driven away from Devil's Den and never looked back. But the RV wouldn't start. The engine turned over sluggishly, making that grinding noise that had gotten progressively worse on the drive here, and then simply quit. I tried again. Nothing. The battery was dead, or the starter had failed, or some essential component had chosen this precise moment to give up entirely. I was trapped. The day passed in a haze of mechanical denial. I spent hours under the RV's hood, checking connections, testing fuses, doing everything I could remember from a YouTube video I'd watched once about basic engine repair. Nothing worked. The Winnebago sat there like a beached whale, inert and useless. Around noon, I decided to walk back to the ranger station. It was only 2 miles, maybe less. I could get help, arrange a tow, spend the night somewhere with actual walls and locks that would hold. But when I started down the gravel road, I found it had changed. The road that had brought me here yesterday, straight, well-maintained, clearly marked, had transformed into something else overnight. It twisted and branched in ways I didn't remember, splitting off into narrow paths that disappeared into the undergrowth. The trees pressed closer, their branches forming a canopy so thick that almost no light reached the ground. And everywhere, hanging from branches and tucked into the crooks of trees, were small bundles of sticks tied together with what looked like hair. I turned back. The walk to my campsite should have taken 5 minutes. It took an hour. The road kept shifting, doubling back on itself, leading me in circles. Twice I passed the same fallen log, identifiable by the distinctive lightning strike burn down its center. The third time I saw it, I sat down and cried from sheer frustration and growing fear. When I finally stumbled back into the clearing, the sun was already setting again. I'd been walking all day, and I'd covered maybe a 1/4 mile. That night was worse. The footsteps started earlier, just after full darkness fell, but this time, they were accompanied by other sounds, scratching at the windows, something heavy being dragged around the perimeter of the clearing, and voices, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all whispering my name in that same flat, effectless tone. Faith, 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 faith. An endless litany, overlapping and echoing, coming from every direction at once. I huddled on the bed with my hands pressed over my ears, but I could still hear them. The sound seemed to bypass my ears entirely and speak directly into my skull. Around midnight, something knocked on the door. 3 precise raps, almost polite, then a pause, then 3 more. Faith. This voice was different from the others, deeper, more substantial, carrying a weight of authority the whispers lacked. Faith, open the door. Go away, I managed to choke out. You can't stay in there forever. The silence wants you. It's been waiting so long. I don't understand. Open the door, Faith. Come outside. Come join us in the quiet. No. The knocking stopped. For a moment I thought whatever it was had given up and left. Then the RV began to shake. It started as a gentle rocking, like someone pushing against the side. Then harder, more violent, until I was being thrown around like a doll in a dog's mouth. The cabinets burst open, spilling their contents. The fold-out bed collapsed, dumping me onto the floor. I scrambled toward the bathroom, the smallest, most enclosed space in the vehicle, and locked myself inside just as the driver's side window shattered. Glass rained down on the kitchenette. Cold air rushed in, carrying that stale ice smell so strongly I could taste it. And then, impossibly, silence. The shaking stopped. The whispers ceased. Even the wind died. In that absolute quiet, I heard something climbing through the broken window. I don't know how long I stayed in that bathroom. Hours, certainly. maybe longer. At some point, I heard movement in the main cabin. Slow, deliberate, the sound of someone searching methodically through my belongings. Drawers being opened and closed. Cushions being lifted and replaced. The rustle of papers being examined. Then footsteps approaching the bathroom door. Faith. The voice was right outside, separated from me by 2 inches of pressboard. I know you're frightened. I know you don't understand. But you were called here. The silence spoke your name, and you answered. There's no going back now. What do you want from me? Want? The silence doesn't want anything. It simply is. It exists in the spaces between things, in the gaps where meaning breaks down. And sometimes, when a person is empty enough, broken enough, the silence decides to fill them. I thought about the past 3 months. The divorce papers signed in a lawyer's office that smelled like old carpet. The HR meeting where they'd used words like restructuring and redundancy while avoiding my eyes. My sister's voicemail played over and over. I can't help you anymore, Faith. You need to help yourself. Empty. Broken. Yes, that described me perfectly. I don't want this, I whispered. That doesn't matter. You're already here. You've already been chosen. Now open the door. The handle began to turn. I don't remember making the decision. One moment I was pressed against the far wall of the bathroom, watching that handle rotate with glacial slowness. The next, I was moving, throwing open the door and charging forward with my shoulder lowered like a linebacker. I hit something solid but yielding, and we both went down in a tangle of limbs. I caught a glimpse of a face, pale, smooth, with features that didn't quite align properly, like a painting someone had tried to erase and repaint, before I was scrambling over it and diving for the broken window. I cut myself badly getting through. Gashes opened on my forearms, my stomach, my thighs. Blood soaked through my clothes immediately, hot against my skin. But I was outside, free of the RV's metal cage, and I was running. The forest at night was a nightmare made solid. Tree branches whipped at my face and caught in my hair. Roots seemed to reach up deliberately to trip me. And behind me, never faltering, never speeding up or slowing down, I could hear footsteps keeping perfect pace. I ran for what felt like hours, though it might have been minutes. Time had lost all meaning, stretched and compressed by terror and exhaustion. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. Blood ran down my arms and dripped from my fingers, leaving a trail anyone or anything could follow. Then I burst out of the trees and found myself in a clearing I didn't recognize. In the center stood a structure that defied immediate comprehension. At first, I thought it was a lean-to or primitive shelter, but as my eyes adjusted to the moonlight filtering through the canopy, I realized it was something far stranger. Branches and logs had been arranged in a rough circle, their ends meeting in the middle to form a conical shape. But instead of being woven or stacked, they seemed to grow together, fused at impossible angles. And inside the structure, I could see shapes. Human shapes. Dozens of them, standing perfectly still, their faces all turned toward me. In the darkness, I couldn't make out details, but I knew, with the same bone-deep certainty that had warned me yesterday, that these weren't people anymore. They were something the silence had already claimed. Faith. The voice came from all of them at once, a perfectly synchronized chorus. Faith, you ran. That was foolish. Now you found the place where the called ones wait. Look at them. Look at what you'll become. I backed away slowly, my eyes never leaving those motionless figures. My heel caught on something and I nearly fell. When I looked down, I saw I'd stepped on one of those stick bundles, the ones I'd seen hanging from trees. This one was different, though. This one had a photograph tied to it with hair. A photograph of me. Not recent. It was from years ago. From my wedding day. I was smiling in the picture, young and stupid and convinced my life was going to be perfect. Someone had found this photograph, or obtained it somehow, and brought it here to this place where the called ones waited. You see, the chorus said, you were chosen long ago. The silence has been speaking your name for years, but you were too full of noise to hear. The divorce, the job, the isolation. Those were just ways to empty you out, to make room for what you were always meant to become. No. My voice was barely a whisper. No, I won't. You don't have a choice. You're already here. You've already heard your name in the silence. All that's left is to surrender. The figures began to move. Not walking. They simply shifted positions instantaneously, like video frames skipping. One moment they were inside the structure, the next they were forming a circle around me. I could see their faces now, and I wished I couldn't. They were smooth, almost featureless, with just the suggestion of eyes and mouths, like masks molded from flesh, and they all wore the same expression of serene emptiness, as if every thought and feeling had been scooped out and replaced with nothing. They reached for me with hands that had too many fingers. I ran again, straight forward this time, lowering my shoulder and barreling through the gap between two of them. Their fingers brushed my arms, my neck, my face, cold as ice, sticky as old glue, but I broke free and plunged back into the forest. I don't know how I found the trail. Maybe I was lucky. Maybe something in me remembered the way. Maybe the forest itself decided to let me go. But somehow, after running blind for an eternity, I saw the weathered wooden sign marking the Butterfield Nature Trail, and beyond it, the lights of the main park road. I staggered onto the pavement just as the sun was rising. A park maintenance truck was coming down the road, and the driver, a young man with a beard and a surprised expression, slammed on his brakes when he saw me. "Jesus Christ, lady, what happened to you?" I looked down at myself. My clothes were shredded, soaked with blood from dozens of cuts. My hands were torn and filthy, fingernails broken down to the quick. I probably looked like a disaster victim or a crime scene. "My RV," I managed to say. "Site 47. Something. Hey, take it easy. Let me get you to the ranger station. Can you walk?" I nodded and climbed into the truck. As we drove away from the forest, I kept looking back, expecting to see those smooth-faced figures emerging from the trees. But the woods remained still and empty, giving up none of their secrets. Marjorie was at the ranger station when we arrived. She took one look at me and her face went very still. "You were at 47, she said. Not a question. "Yes. Did you hear it? The silence?" I stared at her. "You know, we all know. The locals, the longtime rangers. Some places," she trailed off, searching for words. "Some places are thin. The barrier between what is and what isn't gets worn down and things slip through. Devil's Den is one of those places. The silence that lives here, it's old, older than the trees, and it has a way of calling to people who are already empty inside. Why didn't you warn me? Would you have believed me? Would you have left?" She shook her head. "People come here looking for peace and quiet. Most of them get exactly that and leave. But every now and then, someone like you shows up. Someone with holes in their life big enough for the silence to notice. And once it says your name..." She looked away. "Well, you're one of the lucky ones. You got out." "Lucky," I repeated bitterly. "They took me to the hospital in Fayetteville. 23 stitches, a tetanus shot, antibiotics for the infections that had already started in my cuts, and a prescription for sleeping pills I never filled. The RV was towed out of the park at my expense. It had to be junked, the mechanic said. Something had seized up in the engine. Plus, there was that broken window and the water damage from the rain that had blown in. I didn't tell anyone the real story. What would be the point? I filed a police report claiming I'd been attacked by an animal. Maybe a bear, maybe a pack of coyotes, I wasn't sure. The officer taking my statement looked skeptical but wrote it down anyway. That was 4 months ago. I live in Little Rock now, in a third-floor apartment in a building that's always full of noise, TVs, conversations, traffic from the street. I got a job doing data entry for an insurance company. It's mindless work, but it pays the rent. My sister called me last week wanting to reconnect. I told her I was busy. But sometimes late at night when the building finally goes quiet, I hear it. Faith, just a whisper, barely audible, like wind through a crack in the window. I tell myself it's my imagination, trauma echoing in my mind. I turn on the TV, the radio, anything to fill the silence with sound. I blast music through my headphones until my ears hurt. Because I know the truth. I know what Marjorie couldn't bring herself to say. The silence didn't let me go. I escaped physically, but part of me is still there in that clearing, standing inside that structure with the other called ones. Part of me has already been emptied out and filled with nothing. And every day, the part that stayed behind gets a little bit bigger. I feel it growing inside me like a tumor, cold and hollow. When people talk to me, their words sound distant, muffled, as if I'm hearing them from underwater. Food tastes like nothing. Music sounds like noise. I move through my days like a ghost, present but not really here. Sometimes I catch myself standing perfectly still for hours, just listening for my name in the spaces between sounds. Last week, I found a bundle of sticks tied with hair in my mailbox. I don't know who left it there. I don't know if it matters. I keep thinking about those smooth-faced figures in the clearing, standing in their peaceful emptiness, free from the burden of being human. Part of me, the part that stayed behind, envies them. The divorce, the job, the isolation, ways to empty you out, the chorus had said, to make room for what you were always meant to become. I think I'm starting to understand. Tonight, the apartment is quieter than usual. My upstairs neighbors are gone, visiting family. The street below has emptied out. I'm sitting in my bedroom with the lights off, and I can feel the silence pressing in. It knows I'm listening. Faith, there it is. Louder now. Clearer. Not outside anymore. Inside me. I stand up and walk to the window. Down in the parking lot, I can see figures standing in a circle, their faces turned up toward my apartment. They're waiting. They've always been waiting. And I realize, finally, that Marjorie was wrong. I didn't get out. I never left at all. My body drove away from Devil's Den, got stitched up, moved to a new city. But the real me, the essential me, is still standing in that clearing, waiting to be emptied out and filled with silence. This thing living in my skin, typing these words, it's just a shell, an echo, a voice repeating in the void. The figures in the parking lot begin to move, flowing toward my building like water finding its level. I hear footsteps in the stairwell, dozens of them climbing up, coming to collect what they've already claimed. I'm not afraid anymore. Fear requires caring about something, and I don't think I remember how to do that. The holes inside me have grown so large there's barely anything left. They're at my door now. I can hear them on the other side, waiting with infinite patience. Faith, they say, and I realize it's not a name anymore. It's a command. I reach for the doorknob. The silence opens its mouth, and I finally understand what it's been trying to tell me all along. There was never anything to fear, because there was never anything there. I've been running from emptiness, from the void that was always at my core. The silence didn't choose me. I chose it every time I let another piece of myself be carved away by disappointment and failure and loss. The door opens. They come in, these smooth-faced things that might have been people once. They surround me, their too-many-fingered hands gentle now, almost loving. One of them reaches up and touches my face, and I feel my features beginning to smooth, to erase, to simplify down to that serene blankness. It doesn't hurt. Nothing hurts anymore. In the distance, I hear sirens. Someone must have called the police. Maybe a neighbor noticed the broken door, the strange figures in the parking lot. But they won't get here in time. And even if they do, what will they find? An empty apartment, a missing woman, another unsolved disappearance that will make the local news for a day or two before everyone forgets. My last coherent thought, before the silence fills me completely. I wonder if anyone will notice I'm gone. Then the emptiness takes me, and I finally stop wondering anything at all. The silence says my name one last time, and I answer. I am Faith, and I am 34, and I am nowhere. I am the space between words, the gap in conversation, the pause before sound. I am what you fear when the world goes quiet and you realize how alone you truly are. I am still here, waiting, listening, for your name. Story 5. My name is Jack. I'm 34 years old, and the path into the Ozark National Forest in Arkansas led to my own grave. I need you to understand that before everything happened, before I saw what waited for me carved into granite beneath dying oak trees. The RV trip was supposed to be a reset. My divorce from Caroline had been finalized 3 months prior, the kind that leaves both people hollow and relieved simultaneously. My younger brother Marcus suggested we take his new RV out for a week, just the two of us, somewhere remote enough that cell service would be a fantasy, and the only sounds would be wind through trees and crackling campfires. Marcus was 31, perpetually optimistic in a way that sometimes grated against my more pessimistic worldview, but he meant well. He'd bought the RV impulsively after a promotion at his tech job, a gleaming 32-foot Winnebago that still smelled of synthetic new car scent mixed with pine air freshener. The plan was simple. Drive down from our hometown in Missouri, find a secluded spot in the Ozark backcountry where dispersed camping was allowed, and spend a week fishing, drinking beer, and pretending our lives weren't slowly calcifying into routines we never asked for. We left on a Tuesday morning in late October, the sky that particular shade of gray that promises cold rain but never quite delivers. Marcus drove, his hands drumming against the steering wheel to some podcast about unsolved mysteries. I watched Missouri blur past the passenger window, farms giving way to increasingly dense forest, the trees already surrendering their leaves in explosions of rust and gold. The first sign something wasn't right came when Marcus pulled off Highway 7 onto a Forest Service road that didn't appear on our GPS. He'd insisted on using an old paper map he'd found at a gas station, the kind with grease stains and torn edges that looked like it had been printed sometime in the 90s. "This'll take us to a spot my coworker mentioned," Marcus said, squinting at the map spread across his lap. "Said it's perfect. Right by Buffalo River, totally isolated, hasn't been touched by tourists in years." "Your coworker who's been here? Or your coworker who heard about it from someone else?" I asked. "Does it matter? It might if we get stuck in mud or run into a dead end." Marcus laughed, that easy sound that used to make me feel lighter but now just emphasized how heavy I'd become. "Come on, Jack. When did you turn into such a pessimist?" I didn't answer because we both knew exactly when. The Forest Service road was barely maintained, more suggestion than actual path, and the RV bounced and creaked over ruts deep enough to swallow small animals. Trees pressed close on both sides, their branches occasionally scraping against the RV's roof with sounds like fingernails on metal. The afternoon light filtering through the canopy turned everything greenish and submarine, as if we were descending into some arboreal ocean. After 40 minutes of teeth-rattling progress, we emerged into a clearing that seemed almost deliberately placed, a near-perfect circle of flat ground surrounded by towering oaks and hickories. A creek, I assumed, was a tributary of Buffalo River burbled somewhere to our left, invisible but audible. The clearing was big enough for the RV and a fire pit, which someone had already constructed from river stones in the center of the space. "See?" Marcus said, killing the engine. "Perfect." I stepped out first, my boots sinking slightly into earth that felt unnaturally soft, almost spongy. The air smelled wrong. Not bad exactly, but off, like metal and old flowers and something else I couldn't identify. The kind of smell that makes your hindbrain sit up and take notice even if your conscious mind dismisses it. Marcus was already setting up, extending the RV's awning, unfolding camping chairs, moving with the efficiency of someone who'd watched too many YouTube videos about proper camping technique. I walked the perimeter of the clearing, examining the tree line. The forest beyond was dark in the way old forests get, where the canopy is so thick that undergrowth struggles and everything at ground level exists in permanent twilight. That's when I saw them. Small cairns, stacks of stones barely a foot high, positioned at regular intervals around the clearing's edge. 7 of them, I counted. Each one looked recently made, the stones still bearing traces of mud and river moss. I was about to call Marcus over when I noticed something else. Scratched into the largest oak tree about 6 feet up was a series of marks, not random, deliberate. They formed letters, crude but readable. "Turn back." "Hey, Marcus," I called out, keeping my voice level. "Come, look at this." He bounded over, still energized by the drive and the prospect of a week away from responsibility. I pointed at the carving. His smile faltered. Probably just kids. Kids who stacked these? I gestured at the nearest cairn. Hikers. Trail markers, maybe. We're not on a trail. Marcus studied the carving for a long moment, then shrugged with forced casualness. Look, someone was probably trying to scare people away from their favorite spot. You know how territorial locals get about this stuff. I wanted to argue, but I was exhausted from the drive, and from the 6 months of legal battles and the year before that of watching my marriage dissolve like sugar in acid. So I nodded and helped Marcus finish setting up. That first night passed quietly enough if you ignored the small things. The fire Marcus built took 3 tries to catch, the wood spitting and smoking despite being dry. Our phones, predictably, had no service, but the RV's radio picked up only static on every frequency, a roaring hiss that Marcus quickly turned off. The creek's burbling seemed to grow louder as darkness fell, less like water over stones and more like voices murmuring just below the threshold of understanding. We drank beer and ate steaks Marcus grilled over the fire, and we talked about nothing important. Sports, movies, whether Marcus should ask out the woman from his office's accounting department. Normal brother stuff. But I kept glancing at the tree line, where the darkness seemed to press against our small circle of firelight with almost physical weight. Around 10 p.m., Marcus yawned and announced he was turning in. I stayed by the fire, nursing my 4th beer, watching shadows dance in the spaces between trees. That's when I heard it for the first time. Footsteps. Not animal footsteps. I'd heard enough deer and raccoons to know the difference. These were bipedal, measured, circling the clearing just beyond the firelight's reach. I stood slowly, grabbing the heavy flashlight from beside my chair, and aimed it toward the sound. Nothing. The footsteps stopped the instant the light beam swept across the tree line. I stood there for a full minute, arm extended, illuminating absolutely nothing but trees and undergrowth. Then, just as I was about to lower the flashlight and convince myself I'd imagined it, I heard breathing. Close. Maybe 20 feet away, somewhere in the darkness to my right. Deep, steady breaths that sounded too large to come from anything that should be in these woods. I swung the light toward it. Still nothing. "Marcus!" I called toward the RV, my voice smaller than I intended. No response. Through the RV's windows I could see him already sprawled in his bunk, mouth open, dead to the world in that way he'd had since childhood. The breathing stopped. The forest returned to its previous chorus of night sounds. Insects, the creek, wind through leaves. I told myself it was a bear, maybe, or a large buck, and that animals sound different in the dark, bigger and stranger. I told myself a lot of things as I doused the fire and locked myself inside the RV, checking the door twice. I didn't sleep well. The RV's windows became black mirrors reflecting only the dim emergency light over the sink, and every sound from outside seemed amplified, deliberate. Twice I thought I heard something walking around the RV, circling it slowly, but when I finally worked up the courage to peer through the blinds, I saw nothing. Morning came gray and cold, mist rising from the creek like the forest was exhaling. Marcus woke chipper, complaining good-naturedly about the RV's thin mattress, and started coffee while I sat at the small dinette table feeling like I'd been awake for days. "You look like hell," Marcus observed, handing me a mug. "Couldn't sleep. Kept hearing things." "Things? Animals. Something walking around outside." Marcus glanced out the window at the peaceful clearing, now full of soft morning light and bird song. "Probably a deer. They get curious. This is their home, remember?" I wanted to tell him about the breathing, about how the footsteps had stopped the instant I aimed light toward them, about how something had felt fundamentally wrong about the sounds. But in the gentle morning light, with coffee warming my hands and my brother's easy confidence filling the small space, it all seemed ridiculous. We spent that day hiking, following the creek upstream through terrain that grew increasingly rugged. The Ozarks aren't mountains in the dramatic sense, but they're old and complicated, full of limestone bluffs and sinkholes and caves that swallow whole streams. Marcus wanted to find a good fishing spot, Somewhere the creek widened into pools where bass and trout might congregate. Around noon, we found something else instead. The hike had taken us maybe 3 miles from our campsite, through forest that seemed to grow denser and darker despite the climbing sun. We rounded a bend where the creek carved through a narrow gorge, and there, tucked against a limestone bluff, was a structure. Not a cabin, it was too deliberate for that. Stone walls about 4 feet high formed a rectangle maybe 15 feet on each side, roofless, with a single entrance facing the water. Inside, arranged in a circle, were 7 stones. Each one was roughly the size of a human head, and each one had been carved with symbols I didn't recognize. Not letters, exactly. More like pictographs or sigils, the kind of thing you'd see in documentaries about ancient civilizations or in the margins of medieval manuscripts. "What the hell is this?" Marcus whispered, and the fact that he whispered told me he felt it too. The wrongness emanating from the structure like heat from coals. I stepped through the entrance, my boots scuffing against stone that felt too smooth, too worn for something in the middle of nowhere. The 7 carved stones were spaced evenly, and in the center of their circle was a flat slab. Stained. The stains were old, brown and black, and sunk deep into the rock's pores. "Jack, let's go," Marcus said from outside the structure. His voice had lost all its usual lightness, but I was already seeing something else. Beyond the stone structure, partially hidden by undergrowth, was a cleared path. Not a hiking trail. This was deliberate, the vegetation cut back recently, the exposed earth packed hard from frequent use. And at the beginning of this path, driven into the ground, was a wooden post. I walked over to it, Marcus following reluctantly. The post was maybe 4 feet tall, weathered but sturdy, and driven into its top was a metal plate. Not a trail marker, a sign. Hand-painted letters, crude but clear. Cemetery. "There's a cemetery out here," Marcus said. "That doesn't make sense. We're miles from any town or settlement." I didn't respond because I was already following the path. Marcus grabbed my arm. "Jack, we should head back. This feels wrong." 5 minutes, I said. "I just want to see." The path wound through the trees for maybe 200 yards, then opened into another clearing, smaller than where we'd camped. And there they were. Graves. Dozens of them. Most marked only with simple wooden crosses or field stones, the kind of informal burial ground you might expect from 19th century settlers or homesteaders. But what made my skin crawl wasn't the cemetery itself. It was that some of the graves looked fresh, recent. The earth dark and loose over several mounds as if things had been buried within the last few weeks or months. I walked among them slowly, reading what inscriptions remained. Most were weathered into illegibility, but a few stood out. Names and dates from the 1800s, as expected. But then, toward the back of the cemetery, I found newer markers. Wooden planks with carved text, the wood still pale and unseasoned. Sarah Jenkins, January 3rd, 2023. Michael Torres, March 17th, 2023. Emily Hargrove, June 8th, 2023. "These are from this year," Marcus said beside me, his voice barely audible. "These are from this year, Jack." I was about to respond when I saw it. At the very back of the cemetery, separated from the others by maybe 20 feet, was a grave with a headstone that looked brand new. Gray granite, professionally cut, with crisp lettering that caught the filtered sunlight. My legs carried me toward it before my brain could intervene. Marcus called after me, but his voice sounded distant, underwater. I stopped in front of the headstone and read the inscription. Jack Morrison, October 20th, 2024. "That's your name," Marcus said, suddenly beside me. "That's your name and that's tomorrow's date." I couldn't speak. The headstone was real, solid, cold beneath my trembling fingers. The earth in front of it was disturbed, soft, as if the grave had been recently dug and was waiting for its occupant. "We need to leave," Marcus said, his hand tight on my shoulder. "Right now. We need to pack up and get the fuck out of here." I let him pull me away, back down the path, past the stone structure, back toward our campsite. We half ran, half stumbled, branches whipping at our faces, the creek's burble turning into something that sounded like laughter. By the time we burst back into our clearing, both of us were breathing hard, sweat soaking through our shirts despite the cool air. The RV sat exactly as we'd left it, innocent and normal in the afternoon light. For a moment, standing there panting, the cemetery seemed like a hallucination, something we'd conjured from too much coffee and not enough sleep. Then we saw the new cairn. Right in the center of our clearing, maybe 10 feet from the RV's door, someone had built an 8th stone stack. This one was taller than the others, almost 3 feet high, and balanced on its top was a small object wrapped in cloth. Marcus approached it slowly, like it might explode. I wanted to tell him to leave it, to just get in the RV and go, but curiosity and dread had rooted me in place. He picked up the cloth-wrapped object and carefully unfolded it. Inside was a photograph. Of us. Of Marcus and me, standing beside the RV in this exact clearing, taken from somewhere at the tree line. We were both visible through the frame. Marcus mid-laugh, me staring down at my phone. The photo had been taken recently. We were wearing the same clothes we'd worn yesterday, the first day we'd arrived. Someone had been watching us. Someone had been close enough to photograph us without our knowledge and then left this here while we were hiking. "Get everything," I said, my voice mechanical. "Pack it all. We're leaving now." We moved like machines, throwing gear into the RV's storage compartments without organizing, yanking the awning closed, collapsing chairs and tables. The whole time, I felt eyes on us from the tree line, that prickling certainty of being observed. I kept expecting to see someone emerge from the forest to confront whoever was playing this sick game. But the trees remained empty, silent, waiting. Marcus was behind the wheel, key in the ignition when the RV wouldn't start. The engine turned over once, twice, then just clicked. Dead battery or something worse. Marcus tried again, cursing, pumping the gas pedal. Nothing. "It was fine yesterday," he said, fear creeping into his voice. "The battery was fine. Everything was fine." I popped the hood and jumped out, Marcus following. We both stared at the engine compartment. I'm not a mechanic, but even I could see the problem.